was onside. Matthew clean through on Marshall. And that's 2-0.
It's Redmond through the goalkeeper. Norwich lead again. Haynes looking for a second. Oh, what a goal! Danny Haynes has exploded onto the scene in the East Anglian derby.
It's a fixture woven into the fabric of an entire region of the country. 2 counties and 2 football clubs. Ipswich Town against Norwich City has become one of the most colourful derbies of modern times. These are the players' stories of a game that usually lives up to its billing.
To score a hat-trick was unbelievable. To score one would have been great, but to get 3, we were superb on that day. We really were.
It's football and that's what Rivals are about, and I absolutely love it. I always said, more than anyone, I loved all them games. I'm not sure I'll be dining out in Ipswich anytime soon, but we'll wait and see.
It was my first straight red. I thought maybe I could have got a yellow, and you know, every time I go there from any game, I'm still getting plenty of stick.
And I played 477 games for Norwich, and this game seems to be the one that everyone mentions. So I always say I played 476 good ones and 1 bad one against Ipswich.
Norwich against Ipswich is a relatively modern derby. The first ever league meeting between the two was on September the 7th, 1946 in Division 3 South. There has been a heavy demand for reserved seating, and a train is being added to the normal service to convey Norwich supporters, read the Eastern Daily Press. But it was Ipswich who ran out 5-0 winners at Portman Road. Both clubs won major honours in the 1961-62 season. Norwich were League Cup winners, whereas Alf Ramsey's Ipswich became league champions. For years it was the Suffolk club who was seen as the more illustrious of the two, a legacy built up by the great Bobby Robson team of the 1970s and 80s.
I came in 73-74, and it was a club that was on the up, and Bobby Robson, it was known as Bobby Robson was giving youngsters a chance.
The 75 team was a great team, with Hunter and Beattie and David Johnson and Mickey, always Mickey Mills. The 78 team, which won the FA Cup, was a very good team. And perhaps the best team of all was the 81 team, when Murin and Tyson and Walker and Brazil and Mariner and Burley and Mills all came together.
It was good for me, because, as I say, I'd lost my dad at an early age, and on and off the field, he was a father figure to me and great help, and made me into a great player. Nearly all the games we played during that time, we got the better of Norwich, and it just, as we got into the late 70s and 80s, we were well on top.
Did the hat-trick make your name here?
So it's one of my early games against Norwich, and we beat them 4-2, and I got a hat-trick, 2 penalties, and basically I'm still living off that one, and I didn't have to buy a drink for a week. It was quite good. The 81 I still think is the best team, Ipswich I've ever had. You had the 2 Dutch boys, Murin and Tyson. You had Mariner, Brazil, Gates up front, and I was a holding midfield player. And at the back you've got Butcher, Osman, George Burley Mills and Paul Cooper. And as an 11, I think it was as good as your Liverpools or your Manchesters. On their day they were as good as them.
I mean, I remember beating Manchester United, can you remember this? 6-0 and missed 3 penalties. Now put that in any statistic, and you would think that would be impossible.
The 80s, Norwich sort of were growing as a force. They were establishing themselves in the top flight, and in 1985 they beat Ipswich in the League Cup semi-finals to get to Wembley.
Bruce! Steve Bruce has got it!
Unbelievable, great. I think it was just a corner from Marty. I was getting free a bit. We worked on getting Butcher over the road and leave me space, and it just worked from there, brilliant.
So this is the Eastern Football News from Saturday, March 9th. So this is following on from the midweek. It was a big moment for Norwich fans, and until probably the playoff games of 2 years ago, that was the big moment for Norwich fans, because it was a late header, and as you can see from the photos and here, which is the weekend edition, there's a pitch invasion after the game.
Norwich lifted the League Cup at Wembley later that year, and the balance of power was beginning to change.
The late 80s, early 90s under Dave Stringer as well, they reached the FA Cup semi-final in 89 and 92. They really did have sustained success as well. They also finished 4th in the top flight late 80s before they finished 3rd in 93.
We'd all grown together, we'd learnt from our experiences, but to be up against the likes of Manchester United, going to Anfield, away to Chelsea, away to Arsenal, and winning games consistently, I think it certainly put Norwich City on the map as a club. I knew there was a competitiveness between the two clubs, but yeah, probably the 90s was when Norwich and the fans really felt that they were on a level par with Ipswich Town.
Got it down there, and a chance and a goal! It's Newman who's put it in! Going down, the penalty is given. John Walk. 1-1. And I think he's given a penalty. Well, goodness me, Carl Bradshaw with the penalty kick for Norwich has been saved. He's got another chance. He's put it in. Norwich City have won the Battle of East Anglia. It's their first win here for over a decade.
John Walk and Brian Gunn are club legends, but even they had their dark days in the derby.
Probably the worst time was in 1993-94. We played Norwich at Carrow Road, and they had a good team at the time. They had young Darren Eadie, who was about 15, I think, at the time. I was 37, so he was slightly faster than me. And I actually tried to get him in the first half, and I was that late, I got him in the second.
Eadie, great pace from him. Looking to take the ball and brought down by John Walk.
I thought maybe I could have got a yellow, and it was on Sky as well.
He's got a red card. Oh, goodness me.
I'm amazed at that.
Well, that is debatable, isn't it? Scythed him down is what the referee is indicating to Walk, who throws the skipper's armband to Alex Matthew.
I think that's a bad decision. I really do. That's more clumsy than anything in my book.
I guess you were never the most popular over at Norwich, so were their fans revelling in it?
Oh, big time. Even now, you know, every time I go there from, you know, any game, I'm still getting plenty of stick from them.
The big negative for me was the 1996 game against Ipswich at Portman Road.
This is Brian Gunn's famous moment that Ipswich fans love to remember.
I definitely remember that one. It was, yeah, game was pretty petering out for a draw. We were probably going to accept the point. And then when that ball went back...
The groundsman there always had fantastic pitches. He was a Scotsman as well, and he'd always like comment on his pitch when you went out to look at it. But this day, for some reason, there was lots of bobbles, lots of ruts. We'd made this conscious decision before the game that all the pass backs were going to be played wide of goal.
It sort of went in slow motion. I think everyone in the crowd sort of went in slow motion.
To be fair, I don't blame Robbie Ullathorne for this goal. I actually blame Mike Milligan, because if you watch in the build-up, he actually passes the ball back the way to Robbie Ullathorne, who could only pass it back the way to me then. And I came out and met it round about the penalty spot, and a mighty swing at it, and unfortunately it hit a bobble and sort of passed me at knee height and bobbled its way into the back of the net.
It gave us something to crow about for a good couple of years afterwards.
I was at a golf day in Norwich the other day and someone brought it up. I mean, I played 477 games for Norwich, and this game seems to be the one that everyone mentions.
I think Gunny's always handled it quite well, to be honest. He laughs it off, and it wasn't overly costly in the big scheme of things, but yeah, as you can see from our pages at the time, it was Brian's blushes.
In the summer of 1996, Norwich midfielder Ian Crook caused a stir, almost doing the unthinkable and leaving for Ipswich.
There was talk of Ian leaving on a free transfer. I think he was out of contract, so he was talking to other clubs. And then, right out of the blue, I believe that Ipswich Town came in and spoke to Crookie about coming and joining them. which it sounded like he decided to do. I think he actually had a picture taken with an Ipswich Town top.
Yeah, I think those pictures are in existence. That's how close he came to it, but this is before the days of social media and things like that, so the amount of fuss that would create nowadays would be huge.
To think that he was just about, well, maybe 5 or 10 minutes away from signing for one of your fiercest rivals, I don't think he would have gone down too well. He certainly would have been off the Christmas card list, put it that way.
Was there any fallout that, or was he immediately forgiven?
Pretty much, because he was so popular, because he realised that he was about to make a mistake. I think it was swept under the carpet fairly quick.
It takes a brave man to cross the divide. Step forward, Norwich goalkeeper and 2001 Player of the Year, Andy Marshall.
I was going through a good time in my career at Norwich, but I knew that I needed to move on. I knew that I'd had my period of time and I needed to go and test myself elsewhere. Ipswich was one of the main clubs that came in for me at the end of the season.
It was a bold and brave move, moving down to Ipswich. I could understand why he did it. You know, they were in the Premier League. He kept it very quiet. None of us knew. We were all shocked. He'd just won the Player of the Season award as well for the club. So, you know, he was leaving on a high, but it just meant that he had to go down there. He was going to get stick off their fans, whatever happened. You know, the slight one mistake and they were going to be on his back.
It was big news. It was big news, yeah. It dominated the back pages here, I remember. And he always seemed quite calm about it because he wasn't a local lad. He thought that he could get away with it. But I think Ipswich fans were quite shocked by it as well, but obviously loving the fact they just nicked Norwich's best player.
My career needed a change. It needed a step up in being challenged. And Ipswich was that one, European football, Premier League football, and it was something that I couldn't turn down.
Were you prepared for how fierce the backlash was?
I would say to a certain extent, but when I went back to Carrow Road, it was vicious.
On March the 2nd, 2003, Marshall returned to the ground where he was once loved.
Andy Marshall was not popular at all, and that first game that he came back really did create a bit of fuss.
I do remember when we turned up at Carrow Road on the coach. Joe Royer was the manager, and as we turned up, all the fans had come charging around the coach, placards, banners, throwing things at the coach, and Joe just stood up and said, "There you go, Marshall, off you go." And Joe just led the way, and he just let me go. And that just created the atmosphere, a good atmosphere within the players in the club, because all the staff, all the players, everyone just started laughing. And I had to walk off and face it.
Was there a feeling amongst Norwich fans that we're going to get him?
Big time, too much, if anything. I remember that game quite vividly because it was Norwich-Ipswich games are always big atmospheres, but they're not necessarily angry, vicious atmospheres, because that generally isn't what people in Suffolk and Norfolk are like, where we tend to be a bit more relaxed in East Anglia. But that game, Norwich fans were furious and they could not wait to abuse Andy Marshall, and so much so that the focus was purely on him that day.
Did it cross over the line? Maybe a little bit, but I do understand Norwich's point of view. The first half I was defending the Barclay end and I was getting no end of stick. No end of stick. Every time I picked the ball up, every time I went near the goal, they were throwing things. And then second half we went on and win the game.
It seemed to bring the best out of Marshall. He played very well in that game. I think after the game everyone thought maybe should have concentrated on supporting the team a little bit more.
Coming up, some of the great Derby goal scorers look back on the moments that cemented their place in folklore.
This is where we start our work in the morning. This is where all the postmen come in. First of all, we sign in and then we go across, and obviously we get prepared first thing in the morning. I do this before we leave, so I'm just going to fill this in now for tomorrow. What we're doing, who's doing what jobs. So that's the plan. So we'll put people's on the particular jobs. So it's like a tactics board for for postmen rather than footballers.
How much mail comes in every day?
52,000 in total a day.
Garforth Royal Mail Delivery Office manager Alex Matthey wrote his name into Ipswich folklore back in 1998. How much did you know about the Ipswich-Norwich rivalry before you got there?
I didn't know anything about it, to be fair. I did not know anything about it. And to be fair, I didn't even know where Ipswich was at the time.
The whole atmosphere had something special about it, right from the moment you entered the stadium. The match ball was delivered by Mauricio Tirico in a helicopter on the centre spot, so that helped create something special about that game. And then just going ahead so early in the game and just putting goal after goal in, it was a magical day really, and people still talk about it.
I've been living in that for about 20 years now, I think, but yeah, it always comes back, and I think I'll always be remembered for that. I mean, I did score another hat-trick against Sunderland, but nobody mentions that one, you know what I mean? But yeah, to score a hat-trick was unbelievable. To score one would have been great, but to get three, and I think I never came out for the second half. I only played 42 minutes, so I scored my hat-trick in the first 42 minutes. I pulled my calf after about 5. Yeah, this is just 90 seconds into the match. I mean, we've worked on this in training, a little crossover between me and David Johnson to fox the defenders. The ball's been played into the perfect channel, and to be fair, it couldn't have worked any better. It's a sweet strike from myself. And a great start to the game. It settled everybody down. And that's me pointing up to Brian Hamilton saying it worked. It's been a great strike. I mean, it really is one of my sweetest strikes in my career. This one, I don't know what the defence is doing. He's stepped up, tried to play offside. Goalkeepers came out, and I was just nice and cool, put it in the corner. It's one of these ones that I'd worked on in training.
When you've got that much time, though, it makes it harder in a sense, doesn't it? Are they hard, the one-on-ones?
Yeah, the one-on-ones are harder. You've got to have your ideas. Sometimes if you've got too much time in your hands, you don't know what you're going to do. You're caught in two minds, but I knew exactly what I was doing there. This one's a Mick Stockwell again. Great ball in, and it's just a tap in for me that finished it off the hat-trick. I think that was 42 minutes.
Or with a dodgy calf.
Oh, with a dodgy calf. But as I say, the adrenaline keeps you going.
I listened to it on the radio, but the lads who played, they said it was a bad day at the office. You know, when that third, that fourth, that fifth goes in, you just want the ground to open up and swallow. It was a tough day for the football club.
Made all the worse by not only conceding 5 goals, losing the game 5-0, and then having the drug test people turn up at the game, and kept me and Jason Cundy back for nearly 2 hours. And I said to them, do you actually realise I've just conceded 5 goals and you're drug testing me? I
can always remember coming home. I'd never spoke to one of my neighbours across the road, and there was a note and a package outside my front door. He said, "You just made my year great." And there was a big bottle of 12-year-old malt whiskey there. So it was nice touches like that, and people ringing up and saying, "Well done for that. Made my life easier at work and stuff." It's amazing how it affects people.
It goes down on folklore, really, doesn't it? You know, he beat Norwich single-handedly in one half. I mean, what more can you do? And that has secured his legendary status in Ipswich. People named their pets after him. I named my hamster Matthew.
But it's not just goal scorers who remain in the memory on these occasions.
We actually scored a great goal. I think it was Neil Thompson at the time, and all the Ipswich fans ran on from the corner, and Jason Dizell's brother ran on, and he puts a bobble hat on Jason, and suddenly all the fans go back off, you know, game gets started going again. 10 minutes later, Jason Dizell still got the bobble hat on, and I had to tell him to get it off, you know what I mean? Even the ref didn't even see it.
I probably enjoyed playing down there at Portman Road more than I enjoyed playing at Fair's. I always used to enjoy putting one up on them on their home patch in front of their own fans, if you like. You know, we always used to take 3,500 fans there. I think it's probably the only one game of the season that they filled the stadium up. I'm only joking. I've just took one touch on my left thigh, and Fabian Wilnis has come in, and I've sort of faked to have a shot. He's gone running past me. I think he had to pay to get back into the stadium. Probably my best goal that I scored for the club, and looking back, probably surprised myself with the way I scored it. I wasn't a scorer of great goals.
Ewan Roberts may have been the first derby winner of the millennium, but Ipswich were flying high at the start of the century with a surprise qualification for Europe under George Burley.
When you get promoted, you obviously look at what's about, and you're always the favourites to get relegated. I think what stood us in good stead was the fact that we'd been together then for sort of 3 years. I think it might have been the 5th year, in fact, in the playoffs, but for my time it was the 3rd time lucky for getting promoted. So the team had stayed pretty much the same. We knew exactly what we were doing, we knew how we were playing, and it was that continuity when we got promoted in the first season that people were surprised. I think we took it to teams, we played football, we were pretty expansive. Influential players would certainly be Jim in the middle of the park. He was very vocal, he demanded the ball off you. Even if it was like a 1-yard pass to give it back to you, he'd want the ball all the time. Matt Holland was the legs in there as well. He could get around the pitch really well and just kept it simple but put his foot in. So I think we had a good balance of a team.
The success couldn't be sustained, and in recent years it's Norwich who have had the more enjoyable time. Derby days in the 2010-11 season, when Paul Lambert's team completed a second successive promotion with a memorable double, are the stuff of Canary Yellow legend.
Paul Lambert said in the build-up to it that try not to treat it any differently, try and just treat it as another game and try and do it like that. But it's a derby at the end of the day. I think after about 3 minutes I'd waded into probably one of the worst tackles I've done for Norwich, and luckily I kind of got a yellow card from it. There's a bit of aftermath, and I think that set the tone from there for us anyway. I seen Henry was coming, wouldn't he? If we can get the press on him, and then hopefully if he kicks it out or whatever, we'll back squeeze in, because we just had a little bit of pressure on them then. I didn't dream I was going to get it. I just thought I'll just keep going, you just never know. It just kind of settled us at that point, because it was probably the belief that we'd all talked about in the dressing room for weeks, that look, we're not the underdog, we're the better side, and that kind of calmed us down a little bit.
And the second great pass, man.
Great pass. Look at that ball. We had that in the locker all the time, and he used to do that pass constantly, and the way he used to fight him was unbelievable. The famous moustache celebration in the corner, which has gone down pretty well with a few pictures. I always laugh though. Every time I see a picture now, it looks like that derby was done in the 70s, because I had the big Movember tash, and little girls were saying the other day, how old were you when you were playing in that game? The Movember was for Michael Nelson. So he had a friend of his who just got testicular cancer, and he'd kind of said, look, I'm going to do this Movember, do you all want to get involved? In the group we were, everyone basically got involved that could grow a tash. I think Chris Martin started in the start of the month, and I still don't think he got a tash by the end of the month. A little bit Ron Burgundy, mine, but never mind.
This is a good angle. I mean, they're two good angles, that's what
I just kept my eye on the left back, because he just kept on following Chris in, so I thought, if I just keep an eye on him, and I'm not worrying about these two, I think if he can play it in. At that point there, I knew he was going to come. I was thinking do a dink it or do a to smash it. Another good ball in. Ball back to Chris. Normally shifts left foot to shoot. Obviously couldn't do it, laid it off, and used the defender to block the goalkeeper.
Grant Holt was in his element when he was annoying fans, and wherever he went, fans tried to get into him, and he loved to sort of throw that back at them. And obviously Ipswich fans, he knew that by scoring a hat-trick, he was sort of cementing his place as a club legend after firing the club back to the Championship. And that was the game that season when people really started to believe that they could get promoted straight away again with Paul Lambert, and of course they did.
Later that season, Norwich completed the double on their way to promotion. This 5-1 win at Portman Road made it 9-2 on aggregate for the campaign.
I remember getting there, it was weird, the fans didn't get in for about 15 minutes, our away fans. I don't know why, I don't know what happened. I still don't know, it's there, so they hadn't got in, so like we were literally warming up and stuff, and none of our fans were in there. Then the game started, there was a few in there, but not really. Jimmy Bullard scored probably one of the best goals that I've seen for a long, long while, and no one ever remembers it. The last 30 minutes we just ran absolute riot. They couldn't deal with us. Once we got the second one, that was it. We was absolute floodgates, and we absolutely battered them to the point where I think half the crowd had left by the time. I think there's only a Norwich crowd left, and all the ones had gone home by then.
The games with most at stake in recent years were the 2014-15 Championship playoff semi-finals. Alex Neil's Norwich were firm favourites against Mick McCarthy's underdogs, and the result went to form.
Well, here's Cameron Jerome, and that's Wembley.
For all the rivalry, the East Anglian derby has been responsible for the birth of great friendships too.
The first time we sort of became known to each other, we were on the same course at university, had to go around the room, cringy thing, having to introduce ourselves.
He came to me, I said, hi, I'm Dave, I'm from Norfolk, Norwich City fan, and just the first few people have been a bit dry, so just as a bit of a joke I said, and I love Delia Smith.
So I made sure I stood up, looked him in the eye and said, I'm Isaac Chenery, I'm an Ipswich fan.
Immediately, the whole class was looking at us, and a friendship was sort of born, or a love-hate relationship was kind of born, and somehow I ended up living with him for 2 years and constantly arguing about Norwich Ipswich.
Any dig you can get, it even goes down to the mascots. Who's got the better mascot? Clearly Ipswich, they've got a canary.
We have watched a few games together. In fact, I went to an Ipswich-Norwich game at Portman Road with him and sat in the home end. It was the first piece of published journalism that I ever had for this newspaper, for the Eastern Daily Press. So it was a good idea on that side of things.
How he stuck through that 90 minutes, I will never know, because Ipswich Town won. I think he was getting hugged by random Ipswich Town fans that he didn't know. So how he kept his cool that day was unbelievable.
Isaac didn't expose me, which was helpful.
When I was playing for Ipswich in my first season, a fan came up to me and she asked me what's it like playing for both clubs? The stature of the clubs, who's the bigger club? And I said, there's nothing between it.
When you come down here and you get settled and you see how nice it is and how good it is, it's a really good city, it's a vibrant city.
We were just treated well, and for me, it's my first experience in senior football. I came away from that thinking, wow, every club's like that, and unfortunately it's not. It gave me a great vision of what I wanted from a football club.
It's just a lovely part of the country. It's a lovely city to live in. Magnificent support from the people of the city and the county. It is a bit of a trek to get to, but I think that's the beauty of the place.
I came here 15, 45 years later, I'm still here, and I didn't realise I'd be here that long. As I say, I must like it.
Sky Sports Football. Feel it all.